And then I am authoring, as other protesters can tell you, Senate Bill 50, which last year was Senate Bill 827. And if no one's protesting what you're doing, then it's not strong enough. And I say that because if you want to accomplish real change, you're going to make some people upset. But sometimes you have to spark hard conversations, because this has been floating under the surface for a long time, and we're trying, more than anything, just to surface it and have that discussion. And so Senate Bill 50 addresses what I mentioned before with low-density zoning, where we have huge swaths of California where it is illegal to build anything other than a single-family home. I grew up in a single-family home. It was a great childhood. Nothing against single-family homes. It's not about getting rid of single-family homes. It's about whether we should only have single-family homes. And not everyone can afford a single-family home. And when you look at our job centers and your transit in particular, it's not sustainable to only allow single-family homes. We want more and more people to be able to live where they work, and when you ban apartment buildings, you're inherently saying not that many people can live in this area. We want people to be able to access public transportation if they want to, without being able to drive, or without having to drive. You can't do that if you ban apartment buildings near transit. So the bill will set some standards for local zoning, that if you are within a half a mile of a fixed rail or ferry stop, or within a quarter mile of a high-frequency bus stop, you can't limit the density. You can't say only single family or 2-unit. You have to allow those small apartment buildings. And if you are near rail, you can't push the height limits below 4 or 5 stories.
I would say I would set up a public goods charge for water. And the reason is we have to, again, going beyond, funding and financing is core to change the way we do business as usual. And we have done a lot of studies looking at the energy sector and trying to see if we can sort of resemble what happened there in the water sector. And there have been, one of the things that they did there was they put a lot of different legislation went through and enabled the change and transition of the sector. And one of them was this public goods charge. And the reason I sort of say that first is it creates a bucket of money that can be invested in water efficiency, innovation, and low-income low-income communities that need help and assistance for their water bill. Then we can revisit the way we charge for water. You know, I was just telling someone earlier today, we live in a single-family home in San Francisco. 4 of us, 2 kids, 2 adults. We pay $80 a month for our water and sewer. I pay $100 a month only for my cell phone, not my husband's. And that's the most ridiculous thing, because I can totally live without that cell phone. I cannot live without water. So $80 is nothing, and I'm sure if you go look at your water bills, you experience the same thing. Even though everybody talks about how water is becoming more and more expensive, it's still a very, very affordable resource. And the problem with that is we are charging for water volumetrically, which means that when you don't use enough water, not enough money goes to the water district to invest in the infrastructure. So they're not encouraged to encourage you to save and conserve water. So this is a broken cycle.
We have a great environmental law in California that Governor Ronald Reagan signed in 1978 that is greatly abused for non-environmental purposes, called CEQA. And at a minimum, we need to streamline that, especially when it comes to the irony that it is used and abused to stop transit-oriented development in our urban areas when we know that's where we need to be building homes when we're talking about urban areas as well. But it's abused equally, urban, suburban, rural areas throughout California, and it kills me when a great environmental law is used that way. And when I go out to hearings and fight for home developments and people say, well, we don't want to ruin the quality of life, I get that. None of us want to ruin our quality of life. And I love my kids. I'd actually like them to be able to afford to live in the community in which I've raised them someday. But I don't love them so much that I don't want them to ever not be able to leave home either. And there's a real trade-off there if we're going to be building communities that our own kids can afford.
Maybe more of a poetic leaning response. I don't know how you'd sort of legislate for this, but there's a researcher and writer named Garrett Nelson who wrote a piece for CityLab a couple months ago about sort of NIMBY versus YIMBY and what do these terms mean and what's really important here. And he sort of made the point that maybe the less important letter to focus on in these acronyms is not the N or the Y, but the BY, the backyard. Maybe there's sort of a way to reimagine what backyard really means and what local really means.